Hi, everyone, and a very warm welcome to day two of She Builds the Future 2026 Power, Presence, and Progress TechGig's International Women's Day Leadership Initiative. I'm your host, Khushi Mudgal, and I'm absolutely delighted to have all of you joining us today. As many of you know, TechGig is India's largest tech community with over 5.6 million developers, and the idea of creating a dedicated platform to celebrate and spotlight women leaders in tech has always been close to our hearts. And truly, what better occasion than International Women's Day to bring that vision to life? We kicked off day one with our opening leadership panel, and day two began with a very special crosstalk session. The response from the community has been incredible, and the level of engagement, the thoughtful questions from the audience, and the enthusiasm from professionals across the ecosystem has been truly overwhelming. So, a big thank you to everyone who joined us and helped make the start of this initiative so meaningful for us. And now, as we continue this momentum, we move into our closing panel titled Defining the Leadership Roadmap for the Next Era of Innovation and Work. And now I feel truly honored to welcome our distinguished speakers for this panel discussion. Ms. Nidhi Vinod, Senior Director, Learning and Organizational Development at Epsilon India. Ms. Anupa Sadasivan, Managing Director, Human Resources at Wells Fargo India and Philippines. Ms. Jyoti Pahar Singh, Head of Innovation Practice at Associate General's Global Solutions Center, and Ms. Shalini Tiwari, Founder and COO at Cool Boots Media. It's such a pleasure having all of you join us today as part of our closing panel for She Builds the Future 2026.
Thank you so much. Happy
Thank
to
you,
be here.
Kushi, for having us here.
Thank you. And now, setting the context about the topic for discussion, this forward looking panel brings together women leaders to examine what it truly takes to stay relevant and lead in an era defined by constant transformation. Today, the conversation will explore the skills that women must intentionally double down on in the age of AI, what strategic visibility really means beyond simply delivering strong performance, and how sponsorship can play a pivotal role in accelerating career progression. Through lived experiences, the panelists will reflect on the cultures that enabled their growth and share practical insights on staying adaptable when change feels overwhelming. This session moves beyond traditional leadership narratives to define a clear and future ready roadmap, one built on capability, visibility, sponsorship, and resilience in the next era of innovation and work. Further, I would like to mention that the session is scheduled for 60 minutes. The first 40 minutes will feature insights and discussions from our panelists, and the final 10 minutes will be open for questionnaire. So to all of the attendees, feel free to drop your questions anytime in the Q&A window. And now, without further ado, let's get started. So, firstly, to kick things off, I would like to begin with asking you all that looking back, how has sponsorship influenced your leadership journey and what role has it played in helping you navigate those critical career transitions? So, firstly, I would request Nidhi to go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Kushi. For me, sponsorship showed up even before I truly even had a word for it, or I even knew what to call it. Uh, Early in my career, I've benefited from a huge amount of mentoring. I consider myself very, very lucky that I've had very strong mentors from right the onset of my career. However, I'm happy to speak about two moments where mentoring crossed into true sponsorship, and that has made all the difference to my career journey. The first one was when I was, so maybe I should just stop to give a little background. I'm married to a active military personnel. My husband serves in the Indian Army, and I have always joked about it that my career for the first 10 years of my life could be summed up in one key line. Mary had a little lamb, where my husband was Mary and I was a lamb, because I followed him everywhere that he went. And clearly that did not make for great career progress, because I would end up just picking up a job somewhere, shaping it up, making myself relevant in the role, and then time would be to move on. Uh, One such moment where I had to move on, and the first time, the HR head of the organization that I worked with at that time, uh, and this is a time I just want to remind everyone, way back when work from home wasn't mainstream, let alone accepted in organizations. I was navigating a point where I had to again move on from the organization to support my husband. And instead of seeing this as a constraint, this HR leader truly saw it as a retention and capability opportunity. He didn't really say, all right, it's so sad to lose you. let's see, what we can do. But he actually designed a solution way ahead of its time. What that looked like was changing my role, sometimes even helping me understand how we could make it work, because I was in two minds if I could really do justice to this. He actually normalized flexibility without attaching any kind of performance penalty to this move. Needless to say, that decision didn't just help me stay with the organization. I stayed with the organization for 11 years, as against my usual tenure of, maybe 1.5 years or 2 years. But this was the most pivotal time of growth for me. Um, yeah. And in the same organization, the second pivotal moment happened when my manager, truly saw more in me than I could see in myself at that point of time. Again, being an army spouse, I was shying away from a people manager role. My husband was deeply embedded in his job. I was a single parent mostly. And I realized that I probably wasn't up to, I wasn't really able to make the space for both these opportunities. Being a people manager, as well as continuing to sort of do justice to my role as a single parent. However, this particular manager fought me through it, and when I say fought, I truly mean fought. They went the full mile. They explained to me why this was important to me for my career growth. Uh, they were they were instrumental in actually plucking me out of an operational role, which I was very good at. I was very comfortable. It was my comfort zone. And transitioning me into my first people manager role, helping me later on even move into a strategic role. So from building confidence, presence, judgment, from helping me vouch for my own potential and not just past performance, this particular manager shifted the trajectory of my career. And that's why I truly believe that sponsorship is not about just advice. It's truly about advocacy, when sometimes you yourself do not believe that you're up to it. It's about somebody using their own credibility to accelerate your exposure, your stretch, your belief. Yeah, those are that's an experience that I'd like to share with us here.
That's a very powerful reflection, Nidhi, I have to say. And definitely, it is also inspirational for everyone hearing to this. So, Anupa, I would request you to please take over the answer now.
Yeah, as Nidhi was speaking, right, I was nodding and I was relating to it because I felt like that is so true. You can approach a lot of mentors, and the way I think of mentors and sponsors is, you know, if I were to take the example of maps, mentor helps you read the map, talks to you about how do you read the terrain and which routes to take and all of that, right? They educate you. Whereas a sponsor will just find you the ride and say, girl, just go, just land there and get going with your journey. And in my own case, as Nidhi was talking, I think sponsors played a role where my own perspective shifted from, the question that she said, are you sure, to why not? And I think that has stayed with me even as a leader. Today when I'm a leader and I'm in a position to, perhaps intervene, sponsor, create policies, or talk about interventions, I think my approach has always now become why not, and not like, starting from a standpoint of are we sure we want to do it, is it risky? And I'll talk about two instances, right? One, I think changed me as a person, and the second one got me into this why not mindset, because especially I feel like a lot of women will relate to it, and I'm again going back decades, right? I'm talking about at least over a decade ago. This was during my maternity leave. Those days we were not privileged. We didn't have 6 months. We only had 4 months, and then there wasn't great many flexibility after that for you to take additional months. You had to either come back or take a call on what you want to do. And this was, I think, 15 days or 1 month towards the end of my maternity. Leader comes in, not my manager, comes in and gives me this call and says, hey, are you planning to come back? And I was like, yeah, I am, but I have twins, so I'm trying to figure out how to manage. But yes, the intent is to come back. I don't want to take a break if I can avoid. And the person goes, there's something happening. There's an interesting opportunity that's coming in. We think you'll be a good fit. We'd like for you to explore. Would you be willing to explore heading a function? And I wasn't in a state of mind to receive that conversation, because I was, when you receive the call and the message, you're thinking they hopefully discuss flexibility with me. They will ask me, do you want to do flexi hours, do you want a more easier job, to settle in into motherhood. And I was like, my first response was, are you sure you're asking me to head a function and I haven't done that? You're sure you want to do that? And the leader says, well, maternity is a life event. It has nothing to do with your capability, or what you bring to the table. And if you're willing, we'll figure out. We'll find the flexibility you need, and you can still deliver what you want. Just that one conversation, right? It was very natural. It was very matter of fact. But this one leader not just chose to sponsor me when they were not even my manager, but also shifted my perspective to motherhood, to working, to return to work, to say, yeah, why not? It's not like, men take a break when they become fathers. It's today it's equal, responsibility. But why is it that we always think about slowing down, and we always think about, oh, it's something that we will get overwhelmed by? Um, and I said yes. Of course, I had to go through the process. I got the job, but that set the trajectory at a completely different pace, which wouldn't have happened otherwise, right? And since then, as a leader, I never make choices. I never make decisions for people. I always give them the choice. I say, why not? You know, choose and we will figure out. I think that was one, I think the sponsor did for me. The second one, I would say, again, I think made me more, I want to say, humble as a leader and as a person. And this goes back to, again, this promotion process as you get senior gets very complex. It doesn't help only if you have good ratings and if you work hard. uh, and I had set of leaders, about 3 or 4 leaders who were representing me in forums that I was not there, were fighting for me in spaces that I would not be able to insert myself and represent, and played a very pivotal role in transitioning me into leadership position. And when that happened, it makes you realize that you can never really go through any of this journey alone without the support of leaders. And then when you reflect back, right, what made them choose, they were just being generous as leaders, and they weren't singling me out. They were championing multiple other people, but it's not like they were getting anything in return, but they chose to do it. And that again stayed with me, right, both as a leader and a person, as a reminder. But the one thing I would want to leave is, yes, you can't choose your sponsors. Sponsors have to opt in. But, only hard work or working long hours or hoping that the universe will suddenly notice you. I mean, those things are very naive and, outdated concepts. I think today, especially in a world which is changing so fast, it is delivery, not performance, that matters, right? And delivery towards a particular outcome and contribution. It can't be that I delivered on my objectives, right? I think leaders look for that, right? What is it that you bring to the table? Problem solving, creativity in solutioning, persistence, tenacity. Sometimes it's important to see through certain projects and see through certain situations. Values. All of us have values, right? We can't be very proud to say I have strong values. Um, Demonstrating those values and living those values is what sets you apart. I think some of those things become very important, in this journey about both finding a sponsor and we sponsoring each other as well. It doesn't always have to be senior versus junior. I keep talking about this. I have also grown sponsoring my peers, my junior people, my team members, and yet creates a momentum, right? I think that is probably what I would want to leave with all of you.
And that's a very strong and powerful reflection, Anupa. That's literally a great start with the question itself. And now, moving forward, I would request Jyoti to please put your perspective on the same.
Certainly, I mean, whatever Nidhi and Anupa mentioned, it has been kind of very, very strong. And I do identify with both the points, especially Nidhi, when you mentioned that, You didn't know the term. We didn't know the term, but we always had our mentors and sponsors. It's this whole nomenclature has come up right now, okay, which is much more stronger, and it is good because it gives us a shape as to what we should be asking for and how we need to define that leadership. And also about, I will come to that point which Anupa had picked up about, how the leaders represent you as you keep going up. So yes, completely believe that, for me, sponsorship really is access. As simple as that. I mean, if I have to put it in a very, very simplistic way, I will take a cue from what Anupa mentioned in two cases. I will take it in two cases as in very early in my career as to what it did when I got a sponsor, and maybe something which is much more very recent. So as we all know, it is all about, I'm vouching for you, I'll have your back, and that itself just opens door for all of us. It gives you the confidence if you're basically trying to walk through them. So in the very first one, I was just 3 or 4 years into my career, and I was recognized already as a subject matter expert in the audiovisual space, the digital audiovisual space, and was working with some of the senior leaders around. The shift came when at one point of time I was asked, I went on a leave, which was for my marriage. And I came back after a month, and I realized that I have been put into a project where I have to lead 100-member team spread across 5 different states, and the client is sitting in Ireland. Now, that, instead of making me happy, it really upset me. I said, hey, this is my area. You're like, are you trying to set me up to fail? Okay. And this person, again, was not my manager. It was my manager's manager or manager, whoever, because he was actually the delivery head at that point of time. I had to interact with him as a subject matter expert because we were setting up that particular unit. And one thing that he says, what are you afraid of? You're already a rock star, and that's the terms that he used. You're already a rock star. Karlo Excel. So this is a very Hindi thing. I'm sorry to be using that. Just do it. Otherwise, after 1 year, come back. You have, just try, because I think you have a way to address ambiguity, to bring it to shape. You have an inherent capability of working with people around. These 100 numbers will not even matter to you. You'll be able to navigate. And we had a very, very tough project with deadlines of 9 months. We were able to deliver it in like just about 8 months. I don't think I would have got the confidence. That's what Anupa was saying, that why not? That was, it was there where he mentioned saying that, hey, I'm vouching for you. Anything happens, I'm there. So don't worry about it. You just jump, because you have this whole thing, like, when the little kids are there, you say, jump and I will catch you. It's a blind faith at that point of time. And that's what the sponsors really do for you, because they're transferring their credibility. Okay. They're reassuring us, for us and to others, that, we can deliver. And that made all the difference. Something which is very recent. So I have been an entrepreneur, consultant, an independent consultant for almost like 15 odd years. So after I started with corporate, I took that kind of a break. I built 2 startups. I had exit from one, another social ones continues. When I joined Society General, my current one, there was I headed as a innovation practice as well as on strategy programs. But to give the confidence to people, that you can navigate corporate. Now, those kind of things, even though you are donning the leadership hat, it's a great idea to lean on your sponsors, where that whole opt-in comes. You find out who are the people, and while there will be some who will themselves reach out to you to be your sponsor, okay? And this really works in the times of uncertainty, when the reorganizations are happening. Organization is taking a new directions, and this sponsorship helps you align your role, with what your strengths are, what you bring to the table, with all your experience, with your behavior, with what you can do at that senior leadership level. And it's not just about they help you survive the transition, but they help, this confidence helps you grow through those transitions. And that's why I always mention that sponsorship, and very glad that now we have a term for it, that sponsorship is there because someone is investing their reputation in your potential. And that kind of thing, it doesn't just shapes your career. We have been talking about career trajectory. It just doesn't shape your career trajectory. You're able to also see and define your own leadership styles basis that. So that's where I would say that yes, Khushi, all for sponsorship.
And that's a very fascinating perspective, Jyoti, I have to say. So now, Shalini, I would request you to please add to this perspective also.
Yeah, I think Nidhi and Upa, Jyoti, all of them have shared like wonderful, wonderful, stories and views of, what sponsorship was. Jyoti, what is the most relatable is that actually there was nothing called sponsorship or a defined term back in those days, right? And asking for help was like kind of, a bit odd that you could not just walk up to people and ask that, would you be my mentor or would you like sponsor me? These terms did not exist, right? A lot was going on in our heads. For me, I have 22 years of professional experience, and most part of it was very eclectic. It was not linear at all, right? So I started my first real job in the product marketing team, right? But I was always curious, right? I never confined myself to the KRAs, to the roles and responsibilities. I was always keen to learn more, and I always felt that working in one team or confining to one role was very restrictive in the output that you were putting out there, right? You did not have the holistic picture of how things were adding up by the work that you were doing, right? So that made me very, very curious and learning oriented from day one of my career, right? Some people did not even understand that why I was going over and beyond my KRAs and responsibilities, questioned me, uh, called me competitive, right? Someone who wants to grow very fast, but it was just me, right? I just thought that there's more to learn, there's more to add, right, to an organization. So I always operated from an output point of view rather than just input point of view. That what is the output that is getting attributed by the work that I'm putting in, right? For the matter of being sponsors and mentors in my life, I think from time to time, like Nidhi had a saying, Mary had a little lamp. I would say that when the student is ready, the teacher appears, right? So that is very true in my case, that because of my nature, my kind of growth oriented mindset, I found myself very often very isolated when I didn't know whom to go, how to approach things. Internet too was like not that kind of abundantly available in those that you could go and Google things, or chat GPT was like I mean is like was a concept, not even a concept that point of time, right? So you didn't know yet, right? You could just confine to books, reading some things that were accessible to you. But luckily, because of maybe the hard work that I was putting or the determination I had, and I would not take away from that fact that I did strive really hard to get to the place that I wanted to, and I am today, right? uh, Sponsors appeared, mentors appeared in different shapes and forms and sizes for that matter. Often felt like people have thrown me under the bus, right? That how am I supposed to do this? And what again, the Jyoti said that they were putting their credibility behind me, right? And they said, Anupa, again, why not? You can do this. You have to kind of make me proud. I am putting my credibility on the line, and I have more faith in you than you have in yourself. These were the exact words that were spoken to me. And then I thought, yes, maybe let me try and do it. And when I look back, I thought those were transformational moments wherein I felt that I was like completely off the gear, didn't know what to do. But learned so much, kind of transpired and completely transformed the journey that I am on today. For the last 10 years, I have been an entrepreneur. This is my second company. The first company was acquired within 1 year of inception. So this journey was nothing but kind of full of challenges. But from time to time, I had people to support me who put their faith behind me, pushed me uh, to the boundaries, and had more faith in me than I had in certain moments. But I think I also worked too hard, kind of not to let them down. Second thing, which I will not again take away from, is the environment itself, right? So you can have mentors and sponsors from time to time, in your life. But one thing that we can very mindfully choose is the environment that we want to be into, right? I always had environment that was like, very, thriving, in the sense that would give you opportunities, would, kind of not punish you for making mistakes, would reward you and inspire you to do better the next time. So I think that was the other thing that, was working very well for me, was sponsorship and the environment, along with the determination that I had, kind of do the things that I wanted to do. So I think all of this put together kind of made me the person that I am today.
And that's so inspirational to hear, and definitely a wonderful perspective to start this conversation with. Definitely, those powerful reflections that all of you put here as a start to this conversation have really given us a head start to delve into this conversation further. So, which makes us move forward. And for the next question, I would like to bring this question to you, Nidhi. That from your experience building leadership and learning ecosystems, what do you think are those critical skills and behaviors that leaders must intentionally develop today to remain effective in an AI driven workplace?
Thank you. Thank you for that question, Kushi. I do want to just take a minute to add to what we were discussing earlier,
Yeah.
because something that stayed with me, and I'm also inviting, thoughts from our other panelists here. I feel that the beauty of sponsorship is that once you've received it, once you've been at the receiving end of sponsorship and you've seen it make a difference to your life, something we don't really talk about enough is how it compounds. Because I truly believe that I've met in my professional career both men and women leaders who've received sponsorship and have then on become very intentional about paying it forward. So it's something like a movement of sorts, right? That when people have received it themselves, when they see the benefit, I am probably optimistic enough to believe that we have built a world where things like inclusion, things like giving somebody the belief in themselves even before they've had it, become more norm place than just actions that one has to take affirmatively. I don't know if Anupa, Jyoti, and Shalini, you agree with me that it's a compounding
Yeah,
attribute, right?
totally agree. And that's something that, like paid forward is like the concept, because it's hard earned, right? You realize the importance of it, and then you want to kind of, give it to someone who's like, out there deserving and really
Yeah.
wants it. I mean, I think you can't give it sparingly to everyone, but really have to identify people who deserve and value it. And certainly, I mean, that's the mindset that
to
people who
to
have it.
Nidhi, yeah, to Nidhi's point, I'll just add one perspective, which I think very early on, and it goes back to my first and second stints, right? Is what exactly what you said, right? It may not have happened with you, but you've seen it happen with your friend, your colleague, your peer. And then we were a bunch of us who decided to sponsor each other. We were like, we'll get a sponsor when we get a sponsor. But nothing stops us from creating that momentum for each other as a support system, and as just watching each other's back. And I think that one thing has stayed with me throughout, right? And I think that's a perspective to Nidhi's point, right? I would invite all of you, even in the audience, to explore some of these. We have to break the stereotype definition. It doesn't always, yes, a senior person will put you onto an elevator while you're taking the stairs, but when you have bunch of friends, even taking those stairs then becomes an enjoyable journey, right? And you can probably go 2-3 floors higher than where you would have stopped. So again, sponsorship for me has also been at a peer level. Yeah, colleagues sponsoring each other. My friends coming and telling me, "Oh, I rooted for you," and then I go tell them, "Hey, I rooted for you here." That is also in many ways shows up in forums, in meetings, in conversations that you and I may not be there ourselves. But thank you, Nidhi, for bringing that up.
I concur. I don't have any additional points. The ladies have really summed it up.
Thank you. All right, Kushi. So
Yeah.
back to your question about, what critical skills would we want to build? Must leaders be building, specifically, to be continuing to progress or remain effective or relevant in a AI-driven workplace? Um, I was in a conversation on AI-based learning systems yesterday, and I think I do say it without any compunction that AI, to my mind, does not replace leadership now, tomorrow, day after tomorrow, forever. It just raises the bar for it. Now, when I think about leadership and learning ecosystems, there are 5 capabilities that, to my mind, leaders should be doubling down on. The first one is strategic thinking over task mastery. Now, we all know that the advent of AI assistants, AI truly handles execution faster than we ever could. So therefore, leaders then could focus on sense making, prioritization, and decision quality. There is an ask literally on leaders to say, now that you have someone else doing the heavy lifting on these execution focus capabilities, what could you be focusing on? I feel like, for example, a key skill that leaders could really start doing from tomorrow onwards, or deploying from tomorrow onwards, is asking better questions. Uh, because that is now more valuable than having faster answers. There's somebody already available, or an assistant already available, that can give you quick answers. But like I said, shifting from just task mastery, which was something that leaders held, score to themselves, to more strategic thinking. The second thing that comes to my mind is tech fluency. And when I say tech fluency, it's not just tech expertise. Uh, there was a conversation on LinkedIn the other day about a leader who said that there was a code breakdown, and this was a senior leader who kind of rolled up their sleeves and got in and sort of, tackled the breakdown. And it was so heartening to see that for 5 people who thumbs up the leader's approach, there were 10 who asked, why didn't you build systems that took care of it? So the writing was very clear that someone, as when I say tech fluency, you don't have to code, but you need to understand what AI can do and cannot do, and what that means for your system. From the perspective that where is bias creeping in, how is it reshaping roles? I do feel that leaders who outsource all tech thinking, and this is for the non-tech leaders, and that's me as well. If we're outsourcing all our tech thinking to somebody else, we will lose relevance sooner than later. Yeah, the third thing that comes to my mind is influence and storytelling. Now, honestly, in a AI-led or an AI-driven world, logic is cheap. There, I just said it. It is very cheap because it is available at a flick of a literal finger. But meaning is not cheap. Meaning is not readily available. Meaning making is becoming more and more crucial, more and more critical. So therefore, I feel the kind of skills that helps the leader connect strategy to purpose, data to narrative, change that we're experiencing to human impact. That kind of narrative building, and then ability to translate that narrative into a story, into something that can inspire others around them and move them forward, is a critical skill that leaders need to be mastering. The fourth one that comes to my mind is learning agility. And that's not because I'm a learning leader, simply because I feel the shelf life of skills is shrinking as we speak. So therefore, leaders must role model curiosity. I did see a question in the chat, someone saying, how important is curiosity? I probably, if I could be the flag bearer of saying, we need to be experimenting. We need to be failing fast. As leaders, we need to be letting go of legacy ways of working. It's not going to be solving for anything into the future. So role modeling curiosity as a leader, and I don't know whether that's a skill or more of an attribute, but that is something that's very important. The skill probably there would be learning agility. And finally, human leadership. I know tech teams are calling out human in the loop. They're saying the human has to be in the loop. So, but here in my mind, it goes further than that. Skills like empathy, like judgment, trust building, these are non-negotiable today, because AI is going to scale efficiency. It is scaling efficiency, but leaders have to create the psychological safety, the inclusion that's required to make those efficient systems work for us. Yeah, thinking about it, I feel that leaders are not the most effective leaders, or the most relevant leaders into the future would not be the ones that are most technical. That actually be the ones who are most intentional about the things that I just spoke of. About understanding where does the AI system, or like I said, the AI assistant adds value, and where is it that humans are able to add irreplaceable value.
Those are really some insightful perspectives, Nidhi, and some great takeaways, I have to say. Just like you mentioned, all the 5 pointers, there are some great takeaways from all of these perspectives that you just mentioned. And that too comes along from your personal experiences. So that's cherry on the top, I have to say. So, moving forward with the next segment, this makes us move forward with the conversation and bring this question to you, Anupa. That as you see organizations navigate the rapid change and increasing AI adoption, so how do you think leaders can and HR teams can help professionals stay adaptable also and resilient as the roles and the skills and expectations continue to evolve?
I have to say, Nidhi literally created a nice roadmap, right? The 5 pointers, and it covers a broad. I want to say, like, yes, if you follow that, you will broadly get there. You will not, probably go off track. Um, but to your question, right? I think there are two things, right? When it comes to adaptability, I feel like it begins with clarity. Okay, it begins with an active choice one makes. Adaptability, while people try to make a big mountain out of it, it is not so difficult to become adaptive if you know what you're going to adapt to, and if you have clarity about, okay, where will this take me, right? And I think that is where the leadership role comes in, because it is important that the leaders are able to bring that clarity to say, you know what, AI is here, it's not going to go away, but how is it that it's going to enhance your life and not replace you in the entire ecosystem? I mean, it goes back 20, 30 years ago, when computers came and there was this whole thing about, yeah, it's going to replace us. It didn't. It just made our lives so much better. And that is true with AI as well, right? Having said that, skills to really stay relevant and upskill, I'll go back to what Nidhi said, right? Curiosity and learning agility is very important. And especially, I think, for all of us to move away from the worldview that technology is the domain of only technologists. Only technology people and engineers should know technology or learn technology. That world is now, gone. I think everyone should become illiterate, everyone should become fluent, everyone should understand, and that's where leadership comes in as well, right? And I think I can give you one example. Like in Wells Fargo, we do have a very structured data skill accelerator AI programs. We introducing at a very campus grad level. You want the new workforce that's coming in to be equipped, knowing what to do. Having said that, there are also programs available for the entire organization outside of technology. Like HR people need to know about AI and what AI can do. Otherwise, you will only come with a worldview of process and not about capability that AI can bring. And then your solution is going to be substandard. Even to partner with technology, you need to know AI, right? Which means I, as a leader, today need to go there, take those courses, come back, talk to my team about what is it that it does differently, what is my learning, and that's for every leader to do. Without that, again, I think someone said we shouldn't be outsourcing. I think Jyoti mentioned that we shouldn't be outsourcing the solution along with the problem to someone and then waiting to receive a product, and then you go, okay, it does 50%, but not really what I wanted. It's because we didn't make the effort to actually go equip ourselves. So I think even as technologists, right, it's important to encourage people to break that myth that it's not the domain. And with AI and with Chat GPT, Google, and all these tools, it's no longer as difficult to learn, to understand, to go there and do it. And even coding has become a lot more easier now compared to where it was. Those books only used to overwhelm you. Well, oh my God, like that's too heavy, I'm not going to read it. Today you don't have to do that. I think these are, I think, couple of things I would say. But at the end of the day, right, as roles and skills evolve, one shouldn't get too creative. I say with ideas and then identify problem. I would say for all of you working in organizations, there is a long list of problems. There are a long list of things we need to solve. Pick a problem and get creative with the solution. That's what the organization wants. Let's not pick up an idea and try and do like a backward integration. I think there are enough and more problems out there. That's how you stay relevant. That's how you keep upskilling your skills, because with each problem you solve, you understand the business better, you understand technology better, and that's how you create the momentum, right? And then adapting to it becomes natural. I do want to stress on that, right? I think people get very unnerved by, oh my God, I have to redo everything. Start small, start with a problem, start with a solution, get going on it, and soon it becomes, a very natural way of doing and being things. But thanks for the question, Khushi.
Thank you for the answer, Anupa. That was a very fascinating and insightful perspective. I have to say, the way you took us through, the journey and also through the takeaways from this have been really insightful. So, which makes us move forward with our next segment, where I would like to bring this question to you, Jyoti. That in innovation-driven environments, visibility often determines whose ideas get funded and scaled. So, what does strategic visibility really look like in practice to you, and how can leaders build it authentically?
Thank you. But before I answer, I have been having a wonderful time listening to my co-panelist. I just absolutely love the responses and the way it is covering. So, but coming back to my question, and I will have to keep borrowing your points, Nidhi and Anupa, okay, all the time that I'm talking. But to me, visibility is not really about just being seen, okay, because especially maybe today is the Women's Day, and we women, we tend to not really be seen. We think that, we keep doing things, but it is very important. And they feel visibility is just being seen. No, it is about being seen in the right way by the right people and at the right time. Maybe I would call that as the strategic visibility. And when you call innovation driven environment, really want to kind of call it out, what is it that we are talking about here? We, Nidhi as well as Anupa did touch upon a whole lot of things which are changing. Most of the things are changing due to the tech disruptions, the way it has rapidly evolved. But then let's talk about the risks, the geopolitical turbulences, okay, the regulations which have come into picture, okay, the demands, the extra demands of the customers which is coming up over here. And hence maybe Anupa's point where it was saying, don't just solve a problem and then find for create a solution and then force fit a problem. There are enough and many problems there if you can address and find a solution out there, right? So everything is extremely demanding. So if we can be the techno-biz leaders, when we are growing, we need to have a good balance. You don't have to know coding. Of course, it has become very easy. You don't have to know coding, but if you can understand the power of technology and how to utilize that, and that is where you will be able to innovate in the way you are going to be thinking. They both talked about curiosity and learning, which is the key thing out here. But for me, innovation also has one more very, very important aspect: unlearning, and unlearning very, very fast. Okay. So if I have to think from those strategic visibility as well as the environment thing, I would say one is showing impact. Okay. Not just delivery. In the previous one, Anupa had covered this point about it is not just how much of activities you are doing, how much have you really solution-based thinking. Okay. The second one I would say is, are we curating the right kind of places, platforms, or the channels where we want to be? That is where I was coming back to, the right place, right people, and so on and so forth. But third, very, very important when it comes to strategic visibility, building, the right collaboration or the ecosystem or the network. Never underestimate the power of that. It is not about that we will get something out of it. But when you are there, you intentionally try to help people. You find somebody and he's like, you know what, I can guide you somewhere. I can help you somewhere. Your help comes on your own. Or if you find someone, now that I have already met the ladies, something's going in my mind, how I can reach out to them and for what, right? It might be just a to and fro. But what I'm saying is your strategic visibility does not just come with coming to forums like this or just attending networking or being in all the main leadership panels. No, it's a mix and match of everything. Just find out why you are there. Okay. And I will take a very, maybe because you mentioned innovation, I will take the example. I had the innovations practice. Many a time people say that, what should be the format when the team is talking about what should be the format of the event. The main thing is, why are you doing the event? If it is to engage everyone and build the innovation culture mindset, okay, I don't care if there is an end product which is getting to be created and solutionized. I want to create the whole mindset where people are coming up with multiple ideas, they're collaborating, there is a lot of, excitement around it. People are joining teams, cross regions, and so on and so forth. But if I want that what comes out of a hackathon is a scalable product which is really going to create impact, I don't care if it is reaching those 1.5 lakh people. If it is just those 5,000 people, I'm okay with that. If it is a techno-based topic, if it is just a senior leadership, so things like that, you have to be very, very intentional about it. So early impacts are very important, and that's what you have to apply to yourself, because curiosity, learning, innovation, all of these go hand in hand. Again, like sponsorship, there was no term so-called as innovation. Innovation was a far-fetched, very futuristic word. But when I look at my entire career, from day one, I have been in the area of new business, new design, being put into new topics. I was in the startup ecosystem for like more than 10 plus years, and I'm still quite active and embedded into investment and the startups. Those are nothing but innovations, right? But here, logically, I'm driving the so-called innovation. But I'm saying that, it is a mindset that we have to build. And that is where our strategic visibility comes into picture. Do not isolate it as just as a topic. And if we do that, it will really do us good, especially today from that strategic visibility point of view. Is there is no linearity. I think one of you had touched upon that there is no linear. I think Shalini, you had mentioned that, you never followed the career path which was linear. High five to you, because I have been the most hyphenated professional ever who has been having different designations. And you could call it a curious mind. You could be calling a innovative professional, but that's what it is. And if we know where we are heading as leaders, we build those paths and we build it for the others too. Then they will create their own offshoot. But this has to be a very, very collaborative, ecosystem driven thing. It's innovation is never done in silo. It is a collective intelligence. I'll pause it there.
That
Thanks.
is an amazing set of insights and takeaways, Jyoti. I have to say, the beautiful way you quoted each and everything actually made us, relate also, and also inspire us to all of the actions that we would be taking from here on. So, with this, Jyoti, I would like to proceed with our next segment, for which I would like to bring this question to you, Shalini, that as a founder who has built teams and culture from the ground up, what do you think are those aspects of workplace culture that have truly enabled women to lead and thrive? And what, in your experience, have made the biggest difference?
Kushi, I'm still stuck on one point that all three of the panelists mentioned is clarity.
Yeah.
So maybe it would have featured very, at the bottom of my discussion. But, it's like, kind of very, very revealing how important clarity is for any gender for that matter, be it,
Right.
male or women for that matter. Coming back to your question, Kushi, the thing is like, what is culture? If I ask that, how do you define culture? I had a discussion long back with one of my professors, and he very beautifully mentioned that values that we, promote and protect in an organization as leaders is the culture that we are setting as context for everyone to follow, right? Now, there are, acts and behaviors that we reward, and praise for. And there are, behaviors and actions that we penalize people for, right? Which are not part of our value culture in an organization. To me, when I look back, and when I was thinking about this, there's one very, very intrinsic underlying factor that most often as leaders we tend to ignore is the behaviors that we tolerate, you know, that are not part of any employee handbook, HR manual, but on a day-to-day basis, we just let it go, we just let it slide thinking it's all right. Right? I think that is what sets the tone and context for the value and system culture in an organization. Right? That is something that is very very core to my heart. That where does the slip up start? Where does that tolerance bar begin? Where does that end? And what is it doing to the organization, especially being an entrepreneur? I'm very very mindful of that one fact, that we have defined things that will be appreciated, things that people will not be appreciated for. But what about the things that we just do not kind of, we just put it in the gray, right? Not defining whether it's right or wrong. I think that's one thing. Whether, and I'll address this first part of the question for all the genders, right? That that's something that we as leaders need to really really address in the organization, right? To set the right tone and context for the culture. Now, second thing is going back to your question when it comes to kind of promoting women, for growth in an organization. I think as long as women are, a part of diversity and inclusion culture and quota, that is not happening. That's my very personal take, right? As long as that's happening, because there are numbers of seats to be filled, and kind of position that women need to kind of occupy in an organization, it's not happening. It's just like kind of an afterthought that someone has put into it. I think organizations really need to promote equal opportunity for everyone, equal opportunity, enhancing growth, learning. Like Nidhi mentioned, unlearning is a very very big part. And in the age of AI, I think that's going to be like a very very prominent fixture in our lives, is like how we learn and how we unlearn, right? I think equal opportunity not being part of any agenda program. As long as these terms are there, I feel that it's not the right kind of culture or the context that we are setting for anyone in the organization, right? An organization has to be like an equal opportunity, has to look for things as they are, rights for rights, wrong for wrongs, and things that we do not want to kind of appreciate and put it out there, not leave it in the grace. And really promote with clarity. Nidhi, going back to you, and Anupa, Jyoti, that with clarity and context, right? Create a workplace that is kind of growth oriented and opportunity oriented for everyone, right? That is what I feel a workplace should look like, for women, for men, for everyone, for that matter.
And that's a very important distinction, Shalini. Definitely, your perspective emphasizes that leadership influence is not only about delivering those results, but also ensuring that that impact is recognized at those right strategic levels. So before we close, I would like to ask one final question from all of you before proceeding with the audience Q&A. So which would be that as you see that there are so many meaningful actions that we need to take, but what would be that one meaningful action that you will personally commit to after today's conversation to support leadership growth and inclusion? Nidhi, I would request you to go first.
Thank you. This is something that I've been committed to for a while, so it's not something new. But however, today's conversation is just adding the right impetus that I need to, bring it top of my mind. I commit to moving at least one high potential a woman to visibility by design. Not because it's an afterthought, not because it's something that we must do, but being intentional about it. And when I mean that, it's not just about mentoring, not just about giving feedback, but actively sponsoring the kind of sponsorship that we spoke about today. Putting her name forward for a stretch role, a high stakes project, sometimes just sitting down with her and saying, what's the harm in trying it? Why not? As Anupa said. I also loved what Anupa said earlier, that, as women navigate specifically senior leadership promotions, we all know that do great work and you'll be noticed may not be the best way forward. That's not how systems actually work. So my commitment is to advocate intentionally, not accidentally. It's to open doors and not just give advice and feedback. And it's about being transparent about how power, exposure, and opportunity really move in organizations, and providing my understanding to her as well, so that she can take concrete steps for herself. That's my commitment.
And that's an amazing one, Nidhi. Anupa, what about you?
I think to Jyoti's point, right, as I was hearing each of us speak, right, I feel like this commitment is evolving now. I'll have to refine it further, but it's really come up as we were speaking. Is I like what Jyoti said, right? It's a mindset, right? Some of these things, whether it is solution, whether it is innovation, and I think as a sponsor, to Nidhi's point, I think I have always been sponsoring talent, but I want to integrate now this whole innovation mindset, solution oriented mindset, and say that, let me identify a couple of individuals, who should be pushed into the why not zone, but with a mindset that's saying, let me opt into finding solutions and not get stuck in contributions, right? I feel like that's the biggest roadblock for a lot of people. I won't make it gender specific, but more so in women. But yes, it's prevalent to transition from there and bring in AI into the mix, right? Get curious about AI. Pick one problem statement, partner with someone. Even if you're a fly on the wall, go sit, learn. Do that piece. I think I would want to take that to say, can I sponsor a couple of people to actually do that and open doors for them to do that? Sometimes you don't know where it's happening, so can I make that connection and get them those projects or sponsor that for them?
Wonderful perspective, Anupa. I would request you, Jyoti, to now please take over. Same.
Mm, for me, coming back to the same point, credibility transfer. I think that's the biggest takeaway. And if I am able to, so my takeaway would be that consciously, intentionally be able to bring that credibility transfer for multiple leaders, and not limited just to my organization, but outside, not for the corporates only, maybe for founders and the artists or entrepreneurs, but be able to bring that credibility transfer. And that is in terms of sponsorship, but definitely focusing for women. I understand that, while I do look at all the equal opportunity for everyone, but let's accept the fact that equity is missing. Okay. It is almost like we had to fight for the independence for 1 year. There might be fatigue, but we still had to fight. We are still in the fighting stage. If right now we just change the narrative and miss out the equity part because we think there is an equal opportunity, we might miss that game. So my focus would be a little more leaning towards women. Sorry. For all the male members who are also there, it's not like I won't. I am there with you. I'm backing you, all the great talents. Um, just a 1% extra for my sisters out here.
Right. That's an important distinction to take a note of. All right. So, Shalini, I would request you also to let us know your perspectives on the same.
Yeah, sure. So I have been, kind of doing this continuously throughout my, career and life, and I'll continue to do that. Is like, I understand, what women go through, as individuals, as professionals, as career women, as family women, uh, I ensure that I intentionally have conversations in compelling times, in times that are very confusing, in times when they're questioning themselves, right? This is something that, I go out of my way and do it, create space for them to kind of, speak out, understand, balance. And, I think the biggest support that anyone can give out to, other person is helping find them their highest potential. So that is something that I try and bring out, that what exactly is that they are capable of, right? Obviously at the end of the day it's a very individual choice, right? Things that they want to put online or things that they want to really go through, but it's very important to kind of discuss with the other person the capabilities, the kind of opportunities and the outcomes that come with those opportunities and the chances that we get in life. So I think that is one thing that I will continue to do. Other thing is like I'm a very learning growth mindset person myself, so that I keep propagating to women and even men for that matter in my organization or in my surrounding, is that, be curious, have a learning mindset, keep, challenging the status quo, right? That's something that, you will have to keep doing throughout your life. There is no perfection and there's no like, destination. It's always a shifting, goal spot or, a milestone that you, as long as you're doing that and on that journey, you're on the right track. Otherwise you have nothing to complain about, right? That's the approach I take, and that's the way I, guide or mentor, people around me, and I'll continue doing that even otherwise.
Right, and that's a wonderful note to end on, Shalini. Definitely, with all these perspectives, which brings us to the end of this enlightening panel discussion on defining the leadership roadmap for the next era of innovation and work. Thank you so much, Nidhi, Anupa, Jyoti, and Shalini, for those incredibly honest and powerful reflections. Definitely, we have definitely received some answers to our questions, but now that we have the audience questions lined up, there are so many of them, so we'd like to take them up. So first we have Women's Day wishes from Deepshika. She's wishing Happy Women's Day to all the incredible women leaders and professionals. A big thanks to the TechGig team for organizing such an inspiring session. Then we have the next wish from Sapna. She's also wishing a very happy Women's Day to all the amazing women, celebrating the strength, achievements, and inspiration that women bring to every field. And thank you to the TechGig team for organizing such a wonderful initiative. Then we have Disha and Karthik also wishing us a very happy International Women's Day. And Karthik also has one question. He's asking that what are the key aspects of leadership? So, would you, any one of you, like to go ahead with a quick answer? We'll take these questions quickly as we have a lot of questions and we'll try to cover all of them.
Sure, I could go for
Yeah.
that. Key aspects of leadership, I would say that it is about, you know, very simple. You're not really telling them, you're bringing everyone together to for one particular goal and objective. And that is the key thing. You are ready for, I mean, everything that we were talking about. A sponsor, in true sense, if you would look at it, a sponsor is a leader building their own army of the powerful achievers out there. There is no shortcuts. There is no strict timelines, 10 parameters, and it has to be, you know, tick marked. They're not really telling you those 10 tasks that you have to do. They are literally saying that, that is the end goal. We are all going together. Let's find our strengths and spot on. So for me, that is the primary leadership. They lead. They don't tell you what all to do, right? You're not scared of them. You're inspired by them, and it is earned. It's not like, okay, I'm the manager and somebody has to follow. So there could be somebody who is our peer, who could be a junior and really, really driving and leading some big initiatives and ambitions within an organization or certain programs.
Rightly mentioned, Jyoti. So, moving forward to our next question, Kajal is also wishing a very happy Women's Day and let's celebrate the incredible contributions and leadership of women everywhere. And thank you to the TechGeek team for hosting such an inspiring session. She's also asking that how should leaders balance technological expertise with human centered leadership as AI becomes more embedded in the workplace? So, who would like to answer this one?
I could take a shot at this.
Sure.
Yeah, so as teams start working alongside AI, I feel leaders need to redefine collaboration in one key way. I often feel that we don't really peg the role that AI plays. There is a lot of talk about digital FTEs, but I truly feel that AI is not a teammate; it's a capability amplifier. So as a leader, I think the first thing that you need to be doing is drawing a sharp edge or a sharp line around what is the human edge in your team. For example, AI can bring a lot of speed, a lot of scale, but the humans are the ones that bring the judgment, the context, the ethics, the creativity. So therefore, I think as a leader, you need to be very explicit about what decisions are going to stay human, specifically those that involve people, values, and trade-offs. Another aspect that I feel that leaders need to be focusing on as we look at this collaboration is redesigning work and not just adding tools. Often, I have these conversations with leaders in my organization where, the conversation seems to be more that things will remain constant. How can AI add? But the more and more I'm experimenting with AI, I'm realizing that if AI is layered onto old workflows, it creates more confusion than impact. So therefore, the conversation that we need to be having with ourselves is what can AI remove, what can it augment, and what kind of higher value work does this free humans up to do? What's the work that we can do as leaders, as teams, if AI can take on this aspect? What higher value work can we look at? Yeah, I think the final thing that I feel is that one thing that we don't do enough of, and specifically as teams that are using AI actively, is role model thinking with AI. Like in real time, what does it mean to, for example, use AI to test ideas, explore scenarios, get deeper and faster insight, and not just blindly accept the output that it gives you? Because I often see even my own team, falling into this trap of saying, oh, I ran it by like 5 iterations on a GPT, let's just accept it as the gospel truth. More often than not, we are realizing that may not be the best way forward. So therefore, leaders being transparent about how, when, where, like I said, having that edge in saying, what do we want AI to be looking into, and what are some things we're not going to be, taking to AI at all? Because I truly feel accountability has to stay human, judgment has to stay human, whereas then AI can actually become an enabler for us and not a threat with all the conversations around biases and hallucinations.
Right, Nidhi, and that's really a strong and honest reflection for the same, which of course Kajal can took ahead on. So moving forward with the next question, which is by Sapna. She's asking that what habits or routines have helped you sustain energy and motivation throughout your leadership journey?
I can probably take a stab at it.
Sure.
Um, for many years now, I've followed like what I call is my three mantra. Um, I say always have, like I it's worked for me for many years. One is at any point of time you should be solving or contributing or working on something for the firm. It has to be something that's important for the organization, for the function, for the firm. The second one I always take care is something that I'm taking care of my own team and giving back to the organization. So one, you're contributing to the firm. Two, give back to the team. And the third one is outside of office, you should have a life and you should have something that you pursue, because at no point all three are going to fall in line. One thing or the other will always not work in your favor, and that's when you tap into the other two to actually keep you energized and motivated, right? And that's where you draw on either buckets to say, okay, this is leaking. I probably may not even have enough water to fill it up. It's okay, let it leak as long as it can leak, and then I'll find a solution. But I have something from the other two buckets that I can draw on to keep going. So I that's what for me. I say keep it simple, but diversify your portfolio even for risk, and not just for risk, right? For energy management as well.
That's a wonderful
Sorry,
thing.
I'm just going to add two more points. Very
Yeah.
beautifully put, Anupa. There are two things which I feel, one is, of course, from the work perspective and personal, very well put in. Health. I feel that we all have to, especially because at a leadership role, no matter what you do, there is a certain amount of stress which you can't do away with. Okay, and it is lonely as you keep growing up the ladder. So take care of your health very consistently and learn to prioritize, because no wounded soldier has ever won a battle. Okay, so I'll leave you with that.
That's a great takeaway, Jyoti, for sure. So moving forward with our next question, which is by Deepshikha. She's asking that what leadership capability do you believe will become the most underestimated but critical skill in the next decade? Shalini, would you like to
Yeah,
take?
I can take that question. Just trying to understand will become the most underestimated and critical skill, right? That's like
Yeah.
a bit of a dichotomy, but I'll try and answer that question. Uh, See, there are a couple of skills that are, kind of, inherent to as a leader, to have them. One is like decision making, and it's going to be, kind of one of the skills that will stay on for as long as, jobs and professions and careers are there. The other one is, intuition, which is like kind of very, very underestimated in case of leadership. But I cannot emphasize enough on the fact that how much of intuitive capability, right? And obviously that's backed by a lot of data and a lot of historical, learning and unlearning that you have done throughout your career. It's not like something that shines upon you, but kind of your own inherent past experiences that lead you to kind of be intuitive towards decision making. But I think that's going to be very, very critical. Third is, I think, empathy. Is going to be enormously valuable, as well as could be underestimated in the past, but will be one of the most sought after skills, right? When kind of the world will look like a different place in couple of years. That's something that I think will be a top priority, which the leaders will have to kind of really be adept with, and kind of have come from a place of empathy. So I think these are the three things that leadership cannot do without, in the coming short to long term of the change, the age of AI. Yeah.
Wonderful perspectives and takeaways, Shalini, for sure. So, with this, we'd like to move forward with our next question, which is by Alicia. She's also wishing warm wishes on International Women's Day to all the amazing women. Your strength and achievements continue to inspire us, and thank you to the TechGig team for bringing together such a meaningful discussion. Her question is that how can leaders create environments where teams feel safe, experimenting, and learning from failure?
I'm sure that each one of us has a personally held perspective on this. I'm just going to take a stab with something
Yeah.
that's it's always stayed with me. I feel that the biggest thing that a leader can do is how you respond, or in most cases, how most of us react, how we react when the team actually fails. Like what happens in that short window after you get that news that, all right, whatever we were trying, the prototyping or whatever we were doing has not worked the way we would like to be, or like it to be. Because I personally, I'm just going to take a minute to share that I worked in a consulting environment for the longest time, and there were, as any other fast-paced, quick-moving environment, there are enough and more declines than there are acceptances. And I had the privilege of working with a leader whose ability to move us forward when we had failed, to have us look at what we learned from that environment, so that we do not make the same mistakes again, really set the path for the way the leader I'd like to be. Because never, I'm sure, as somebody who was a PNL leader, it must have really upset him that a particular account or a contract or a deal that we were in the pursuit of is not going to land on our table. But the way he handled that disappointment by just channelizing all our energy into saying, what can you learn from it? What can we not do in the next pitch? It just set the tone for how we felt about, the audacity that it brought in the team, saying, okay, not bad, we'll try something else next time. That's my personal favorite.
And that's an amazing one to reflect on, Nidhi, which makes us move forward with our next question. So Aishwarya is firstly wishing Happy Women's Day to all the powerful women out there, and she's asking that what are the out-of-the-box skills needed to pave the leadership path?
I'll take that question, Kushi, I think.
Yeah.
I think, one thing that is not very attached with leadership is creativity, right?
Yeah.
That is, creativity is something that is not too much spoken of when it comes to leadership skills. But a leader really has to be creative, has to have, different ways of finding, looking at a problem and finding solutions, right? Thinking out of the box. So I think creativity is something which is underestimated, but a very, very invaluable trait for a leader to have.
I think as of
Right.
today, everyone is thinking out of the box, because the box and the shape, everything
Yeah.
has changed. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
the shape keeps changing. Yeah.
so you
And
be
sometimes
happy,
there's no box.
Aishwarya. Yes.
Sometimes there's no box.
Yes.
So true.
So the definition of box has changed altogether. So there is nothing, you don't know where the boundary is.
Yeah.
So everybody, including you, are thinking out of the box as of now.
That's so true, Jyoti and Shalini, of course, which makes us, highlight on this amazing perspective as well. And for the next question, which is by Pallavi, she's asking that as AI automates many analytical tasks, which human leadership capabilities do you think will become even more critical in the future workplace? Maybe we can take this up quickly, as we have talked about capabilities and AI automation as well. Or maybe we can skip as well. What
Yes,
is
it's being covered.
I
Yeah.
think it's been covered, yeah, already.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. We can skip this one. So the next question is that what role does curiosity play in leadership today, and how can professionals cultivate it in highly specialized technical roles? This also we
Covered.
did cover, yeah. Then Diksha is wishing a very happy Women's Day to all of you. And Anubhuti is asking, as teams increasingly work alongside AI tools, how should leaders redefine collaboration between humans and tech? Shall we take this one?
Yes, I think it is on the borderlines of agentic AI. So we
Yeah.
do have experts like Nidhi and all, but I'll just quickly mention that
Yeah.
from my perspective, because especially in the innovation, we do feel that a certain level of relooking, your design thinking really comes into picture out here. How would you define is you relook, reimagine the entire process, because all that you were doing as human beings, if you are just going to replace the technology for automation or quicking that process, that's force fitting. So I would say the best way to redefine collaboration is to first reimagine the entire process as to what are the things where we want the thoughts to be done, what are the places where we want the process to be faster, and hence provide the differentiation of roles to human and technology.
Amazingly mentioned, Shruti. So, with this, we'd like to move ahead and quickly finish the rest of the remaining questions. Amrita is again wishing very happy International Women's Day. Thank you. And then we have Ananya. She's asking that how do you personally stay ahead of technological change while balancing the demands of a leadership role?
I'll probably quickly answer that. I'd say two things, right? One, I think setting aside some point, some time to read, learn, is important. It's not very difficult. It's a very intentional and conscious choice one has to make. You have to put that, it's the commitment you make to yourself, right? That's one. But the second thing is, it's not just enough that you learn. You also have to go and talk to people who are actually applying and creating those tools to understand how does it actually manifest in an application environment. Otherwise, you'll end up having a very theoretical perspective and then get imaginative and creative with your own version of what it can do, but actually connecting, the other side and going and actually experiencing it. I think those are very important. And these things don't take a lot of time. It's just about being intentional and practicing it, every now and then.
Yeah.
Rightly. So, next one is by Vanika. She's asking that do you believe future leaders will need more cross functional knowledge rather than deep specialization in one area?
I think not only leaders, everyone will require to do that, right? So that question is not confined to only leaders. I think
Yeah.
each and every professional will need to kind of learn, acquire, multitask, cross-functional activities, put things in perspective. Example that if you are a data person, you will need to learn how to analyze the data, right? How to use the data that creates a business impact, right? Just sitting with the data is not good enough, or mining the data is not good enough. So I think end-to-end holistic impactful roles will be valued more in the future rather than very isolated silo based jobs that have been probably there for the longest of times. That is how the transition of careers will happen, which is like more impact oriented rather than just task oriented. So I think this question is valid not only for the leaders, but I think this is valid for all the career professionals. And sooner we start, the better.
I think I just add one point to what Shalini is saying. It's so important. And for all those who are actually in the technology space, I would say the era is probably gone even for you to only bank on technology expertise and for you to now have that front to back integration of the business perspective, the business knowledge, what happens, because otherwise you will also, to my earlier experience, be a recipient of a problem statement that is being incorrectly defined to begin with, and therefore the solution also becoming suboptimal, right? So one is the holistic idea that the folks need to have, but for the technologists to also have that, a good front to back understanding of the businesses that they're supporting in the industry they are in.
In fact, Kushi,
Yeah.
when Anupa was speaking earlier about the practices that we need to build, and what Shalini was saying that this is so important for everyone, uh, my personal encouragement to people on the call and people who'll be listening to this would be that it is just so important to what Shalini was saying to build that cross-functional understanding. So, the encouragement is to actually build curiosity across disciplines, to what exactly Anupa was saying right now, spending time with people outside your own function, product, business, users, because to what, one second, I'm a little bad on the names, to what Jyoti was saying earlier about, uh, you know, innovation. I truly feel, and from my experience, innovation doesn't really happen at the center of the specialization. It actually happens at the edge. And if you're not stepping out of your own discipline, you're not seeing that edge. So the ability to zoom out, the ability to sort of look at a holistic whole and saying, for example, even asking a question like, how does my expertise connect to, let's say, the bigger business or a customer problem? Because then that helps you link your work to impact and not just deliverability or accuracy. So I think those are some key practices that somebody should be focusing on right now from a cross-functional perspective as well.
Right, Nidhi. Definitely a wonderful key takeaway to look at. So now finally, we'll quickly take our last question for the session, which is by Siddhi. She's asking that how can organizations better prepare young professionals today for leadership roles that may not even exist yet? And a very happy International Women's Day to all. So who would like to go for the last and final question for the session?
I think we've covered that in many ways right across our
Yes.
conversation, right?
Yeah.
I think today organizations are promoting, learning agility, collaboration, participation in multiple forums, hackathons, it's all about how you show up and how much are you willing to opt in, right? Versus opt out. There may not be roles that are not yet defined, but there are always going to be problems and there are always going to be goals. Organizations are always going to want to achieve something, and then as long as you're opting in to participate in that, I think Jyoti mentioned, right, like, and Shalini, like, the trajectory was not linear. You could call it whatever you want to call. At the end of the day, it's contributing towards a purpose. So staying true to the purpose and understanding the purpose is critical. You can orbit around without a path, and that would you would still feel productive. But I think when the path is defined towards a purpose, it becomes more meaningful.
Right.
I think my personal 2 cents to Siddhi will be, Siddhi, do not focus too much on the roles that do not exist, that we cannot foresee. Be vested in your present, and keep learning. And that's the best way to, kind of be ready for the future.
I'll just add one more thing over here, that yes, organizations are always intentional, because think about it, they're investing in people. There is nothing without people. So at every generation, every level, if you look at an organization, they do invest in their learning and things. As Shalini was mentioning, don't worry about the leadership role or a designation. Gone are those days of designations these days. Okay. That said, organizations are also trying to create interventions at the education level at the moment, right? So which means that you will see not just that trying to make it much more relevant so that they are current scenario specific, but also shadowing the leader concept. There is during their young tenure of first 2 or 3 years, or also doing that for their internship. I guess beyond that, I will go with what Shalini was saying. Just focus and learn. You will be shaping your path accordingly. We would
Yeah.
have retired by then.
And
Right.
if I were to bring a tactical tool input here, not for the organization, but each of the individual, use AI.
Yeah.
We've spoken so much about it. I mean,
Yes,
what can AI not
there was
do
no
but
designation.
Yeah.
help with the leadership rehearsal? Like, if you are aspiring to a certain role, what stops you from putting a prompt on AI saying any of the LLMs that you're using and saying, this is the role I'm preparing for. What are some challenges that I could foresee? How do I navigate those challenges? The sky is the limit on what that system can do for you. So that's a
Yeah.
tactical tool input.
So true, Nidhi. And that's a wonderful note to end on. I have to say, thank you so much, Jyoti, Anupa, Nidhi, and Shalini, for such amazing and forward looking perspectives. Definitely, there were a lot of questions, but all of them have been answered now. And now, as we move towards the end, I would like to take this moment to mention that today's conversation reinforced an important reality, that leadership is no longer defined by experience alone, but by adaptability, strategic thinking, and the ability to build influence in these evolving environments. Through your experiences, we have heard how strategic visibility and strong support systems like sponsorship and cultures that enable growth play a critical role in shaping the meaningful leadership journeys today. So, this discussion has given us a powerful reminder also that the roadmap for the next era of innovation and work will be built on capability, resilience, and the courage to lead with intention. So, I would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to all of you, Nidhi, Anupa, Jyoti, and Shalini, for sharing your stories with such openness and depth. Your perspectives have added immense meaning to our closing panel and to She Builds the Future 2026. Wishing you all a very happy International Women's Day as well.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much,
so much.
Koshi.
Thank you for having us
Thank
here.
you.
It has
Thanks,
been wonderful.
everyone. Thanks, Nidhi, Anupa,
Thanks so much.
Jyoti. Jyoti
Thanks,
name
Jyoti.
is familiar to me now.
Definitely. And to our wonderful audience, thank you for your thoughtful engagement and energy. As we conclude day two of She Builds the Future 2026, we hope all these sessions leave you all encouraged to define success on your own terms and build influence with confidence and authenticity. The session has been recorded, and the recording will soon be available on techgig.com for all those who would like to revisit the thoughts shared today. Thank you once again, everyone, for being a significant part of She Builds the Future. And it's been an absolute pleasure hosting all of you. Have a great day ahead.